let's stay with Matheson. We just talk about it. So he just signed an extension for $6 million per year. It feels under the value of the market. So his agent, you just told about his agent that, said you wanted to play in Montreal, the culture, the stability, the family. What goes into the negotiation?
Yeah, it probably feels under the market value because you're on a podcast with an agent, but
of course, that's exactly right. Exactly. That's it, John. There you go.
Listen, I mean, there's different ways to look at that. I think what happens is when you got an unrestricted free agent or pending unrestricted free agent like Mike, who is a few months, well, several months at this point, but away from being on the open market if he wants to be, I think the difficulty is often trying to figure out what the market is going to be. Obviously, we're in a, and I'm sure you've talked about it on here before, but we're in a rising salary cap environment. There's some debate about how many teams are actually going to spend all the way up to the salary cap because the last several years almost all the teams around the league have because it's been artificially low. But I think it's hard to know what the market will be. For a player like that, we try and go back, and I think with every negotiation, the key word is comparables or comps, we call them. You look around at similarly situated players that signed, how much they got, how much term, how much money. I mean, often those two things are very related. In Mike's case, he'll be 32 when his next contract starts. So, getting term was important to him. I wouldn't say less important to us, but probably less important to us. So there's finding a balance between those two factors. In Mike's case, and in most cases, I think pretty quickly. Like he's a player that really wanted to be here.
Exactly.
We knew that, and we wanted to have him here. We want to make sure he's treated fairly, obviously, but at the same time, we have to remain disciplined with our salary cap structure. And I think, we were able to all come to a place where we felt comfortable. And Mike is a Montrealer, and Mike is a huge part of our team, and that, those aren't necessarily the main reasons for signing him, but they're important factors. And I've been on the other side of conversations like this where you know pretty quickly that a player doesn't really want to be here,
exactly.
Just based on the numbers and the term they're asking for, and there's no, that's it. So again, the term negotiation. I often, when young people talk to me about negotiation, and Sasha, you probably hear the same. They say things like, negotiate against, or I never look at it in those terms.
100%.
Like to me, it's negotiating with, right?
That's it.
I think in this case, Phil LeCavalier, again, it's no secret, is a former partner of Kent's.
Exactly.
Vincent LeCavalier is also a member of our front office. We all know Phil very well. I've worked with Phil a lot over the years. He's got a lot of French Canadian players, and who we've got a lot in Laval and Montreal. I think we all kind of tried to work together to find a place that everyone was going to be happy, and I think we did that.
Exactly, and just to your point about negotiating against, I don't know if you ever heard this. Amy Trask, I don't know if you remember her. She was CEO of the Oakland Raiders back in the day when Al Davis was still alive. And she said something in an interview which I love. She said, "I hate it when people talk about negotiations as two people sitting across each other at the table. Rather look at negotiations as two people sitting on the same side of the table trying to find a solution to the problem in front of them." So kind of what you said kind of made me think of that, and I agree. And I thought it was really cool that in the article where Phil LeCavalier was quoted, he talked a lot about the importance of other factors. And I feel like as fans, we often focus on term, money, and, like it's an Excel spreadsheet. But for players, there's a lot of factors that go into where they want to play. And yes, we had Jason Chevrier, who I think and who was on the podcast with us, and he was talking to us about, how Canadian taxation could be very advantageous, even when you compare it to, let's say, markets like Florida. But over and above, in the article, he was mentioning about him being from Montreal, him being, local guy, being able to raise his kids here where he grew up. Those things have value, right? And I think at the end of the day, that's where the club can get advantages. Good for the club if it ends up being a good market deal, but also the player just secured himself $30 million with potential, like we just talked about, very, very low buyout risk. So good for him.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And it's not just that. I think, we have an exciting young team.
Exactly.
I think Mike sees the plan. I mean, he sees where things are heading here. I think, free agency sounds exciting and everything, but there's also a great deal of uncertainty for a player that's 32 and has two young kids and a family here and his family here to help with his kids, and I think you don't know where you're going to. You may get more money, but you don't know where it's going to come from. It may be somewhere that you want to play, but you don't know that. So I think you're not incorrect. I mean, again, we've tried to initiate a lot of these conversations early. Because I think it allows us to, I don't want to say take advantage of that, but to that does allow us a little more time for that to set in, the uncertainty with players.
Yeah.
But again, with Mike, Kent was his agent for
exactly
the majority of his career. It's very different dynamic than I've ever been a part of, to be honest with you.
I can imagine, right? Must be pretty unique in your shoes when you got that, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, listen, I've never seen anything. I've never been part of anything quite like it. But that's been one of the great. Honestly, that's been. I really enjoyed my time here with Mark and Scott Mellenby and Larry Carriere, Rick Dudley. I learned a lot from all of them. Trevor Timmons, but one of the fascinating things about working for Ken has been that part. Really, he comes from the total other side of it. And a lot of the perspective that he offers on these conversations, I find has been really informative for me and a really great learning experience.
Did you say the other side or the good side, John? I thought I heard the good side.
I said the other side.
Okay, sorry. I
figured you could read between the lines.
That's it. There you That's good. No, that's great. And I think that when Jen and I were talking about this talking to you is, one thing we talked about already on this podcast was how impressive you guys have been on securing your young core group early. I was actually yesterday doing a little bit of prep work, and I was looking at Suzuki, right? He, after 2 seasons, last one being, I think, 41 points in 56 games, signs an 8-year extension at 7.88. And then you got Caulfield after, 3 seasons, which first one was shortened just to burn a year, ended up signing 7.85 cap hit over 8 years. Slavkovsky signed after, I think, 2 seasons, at 20 years old at 7.6 cap hit. And we talk about, also Hudson doing the same thing after basically after 1 season. Like the first one was extremely shortened. And for me, there's a twofold part of this is as an organization, for you guys, there's obviously everybody talks about how good value it is, but there's a lot of risk for the club too to lock in a player that long, that early. And I kind of feel like I might be wrong, but I feel there's been a shift also since the Bergevin era to Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon era with this, is there's been more willingness to secure young guys early on in their careers. And kind of want to hear what your thoughts are organizationally. How did that come about and what is the thought process with that?
Yeah, first of all, I guess it should be said that Nick Suzuki was a Bergevin signing. I was part of it obviously as well, but it was when Mark was still here. And again, I think back to my previous point about against and with, and a lot of that has to do. A lot of the credit also belongs with the players, because they've all been willing to take that leap with us, and willing to commit long term. I think sometimes if you don't like, I think you're absolutely right. I believe the minute we sign a lot of these contracts to young players with relatively short track records, the risk does shift to the club a little bit. The upside for us is the lower cap hit later in those contracts. Hopefully, when the players are a little more mature as players, and we're in our competitive window. That's the gamble that we've decided to take. I mean, it's a gamble, but I think in our case, we're pretty comfortable, and it's a well-informed gamble. But there's also, as you know, there's a gamble on the players' side not to sign these contracts when they do, because they have to maintain things like insurance for future earnings, which once they sign for 8 years becomes less of a factor. Obviously, that money being largely guaranteed, as we've sort of already gone over. But yeah, I think a lot of times it depends too, Sasha, on the timing and where you're at as an organization. As you know, we've sort of been in what Crave will call la reconstruction for the last few years. So we've had a little more cap flexibility than a lot of like contending teams who are right up against it. In our case, through long-term injured reserve, but. So I think a lot of that depends on context. I mean, there will probably come a time when we have good young players we're just unable to give big contracts to, coming right out of entry level. But in the case of all the players you mentioned, I mean, I think we were comfortable that we'd seen enough, that there was enough upside for us. I mean, the people involved in all the cases you've talked about they're just all incredible young men. Like I don't think there's, over the course of a season or 2 seasons, or you get to know these players and people pretty well, and they're all people we believe in pretty strongly. So we were happy to do it. Of course, there's a threshold at which that risk doesn't make any sense, and we were able to find the sweet spot with all of those players. That's not to say we can keep doing it, but again, I don't want to say often we get the credit for those contracts, but I also think it can't be overstated how important it is to give some of the credit to the players.
For sure,
they make that decision that they want to be here, and they understand.
And how do you? Sorry. So how do you present it to the players and the agents? So you present the numbers to show the concept of money now versus later?
Certainly a component. I mean, you've talked to Jason. Jason's someone we know well. So I think there's a lot. And I think this is another area where Kent is really strong, because he's spent a lot of time advising players and understanding the various sort of multi-jurisdictional tax issues. And we're able to present a pretty compelling picture for the advantages of having the money up front, the security, but also the how to structure yourself tax wise, and they're not all the same, because Uri is a Slovak, Cole and Lane are Americans. Yeah. Nick lives in Canada year round. Like it's so it's not everyone is exactly the same, but I think yes, we're able to present a pretty compelling case that, well, if you take, it's pretty. I'm not good enough at math to do it, but if you get $11 million next year as opposed to $1 million, exactly. That has significant value. Even if you think you might get 13 million in 7 years instead of 11 million, it's hard to make up that difference. So I do think there's a big piece of it is understanding the overall. And the other thing with a lot of these young players is they're going to be 29 and 30 when these contracts end, and in all likelihood going to get another payday. So they're if you do it If you do it in more of a piecemeal way, then the equation changes. I think you see it a lot in but baseball is very much one contract to the next, right? I mean, you don't see as many of these long-term deals for young players. I don't know.
Well, I feel baseball. They kind of use the team control for a very long period of time before they actually end up signing these mega contracts, right? Which because you guys could have taken an approach saying, "Listen, we're gonna weigh out those early, very low cost, years." Which when you sign these extensions, they are extensions, so they don't replace the current years of what you're
Right.
paying. You know what I mean? So. But you could have gone through the restricted free agent process, possibly arbitration, a bit like PK had done back in the day, right? Where he went through like a bridge contract and ended up going to arbitration. I think the deal got done after the arbitration session.
That is accurate. I was there for that, yeah.
That's it. So,
yeah.
But is it, for players, is it a hard, or for agents, or both actually, is it a tough sell to come in and say, hey, Nick Suzuki or hey, Kolkov, we're going to sign you for under $8 million a year, but during the course of this contract, like they're seeing players sign for, like Kaprizov's a good example, 17 mil or whatever it was, and they're seeing guys who are going to be getting higher end deals. Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's again though. That's why I give a lot of credit to the players. I think I would say that I think players are more sophisticated now than they've ever been. Like they do understand their place in the marketplace. But the reality is, I mean, Nick is an older deal at this point. But if you talk about Lane Hudson, for example, like he's 5 years away from being an unrestricted free agent after this season. That's a long time. A lot of things can happen.
That's it.
So he, a lot of variables have been removed from the equation for him by signing a long-term contract. So I guess he's got to sit down and think with his agent about what is my upside here. And how much of that am I willing to leave on the table? And we're doing the same thing, but I think it's just all about finding the sweet spot where we're comfortable and the player's comfortable, and that's not always going to happen.
No,
and that's fine.
But how do you find the sweet spot? Like how do you do that?
Well, I think what I find interesting is I look at it from the outsider's perspective. Obviously, I work as an agent for players, not in hockey, but I feel it also goes to the personality of the individuals. It takes a maturity, a bit to what John alluded, to be able to understand that your contract might look underpaid in the short or midterm future, but you got to look at how much money you're making. And are you comfortable, like, pick your poison a bit? Like, what do you prefer to have? Secured money long term? And a bit like Lane Hudson, like, from a fan's perspective, I know, like, I just thought he was playing a little bit more tense the first 4 games of the year before he signed. And I felt once he signed the deal, he was a lot more Lane Hudson we saw from last year.
You told me that.
And I mentioned that, and I feel like a lot of it goes to when you're saying no to whatever contract was on the table with the Habs before, when you're saying no to that, you're saying no to like $70 million US.
Risky.
It's a lot of money. So I feel like for a lot of players, that goes in the back of their mind, and some might be a little bit more a little less risk averse and more risk averse, and they'd be saying, well, no, I want to wait it out. But I kind of feel it goes with the concept of what the club is building in terms of personalities of players, is team first and also team first, but they're also securing a lot of money. Like it's not a small amount, but I just find it kind of goes to good scouting too, because you're not only scouting hockey players, you're scouting individuals. And for players to all buy into this, it's really an interesting concept.
Well, I think, we've been able to use, Nick Suzuki's contract, our captain,
yes,
as an
our
example,
best player, as an example for other contracts. I mean, how to value that contract in today's market, like with cap increases. There's a lot of pieces, and to be honest, not every. It just these don't all happen in 5 minutes. There can be a lot of back and forth and feeling out to find where everyone's comfort zone is. But I think, I think Sasha's right. I think it's hard to walk away from the amounts that we're talking about. Even understanding what the potential upside may be for you as a young player in 5 years. That's still 5 years from now. A lot can happen in 5 years. But yeah, again, I think a lot of just really a lot of credit to the players too, and you're right, the culture. I think Mike is another example that he's very different in the sense that, he's probably signing his last contract.
Yeah.
But I think he's obviously understands that other players have made those decisions before, even though they're younger, and it's not just our organization. I mean, if you look at a lot of the great success stories around the league, I mean, go look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. Sidney Crosby's had the same averaged annual value for 20 years, whatever it is, 15 years.
Well,
I mean,
Connor McDavid did the same.
Well, Connor McDavid.
Yes, Connor McDavid just did it. I mean,
Tom Brady with the Patriots did it. The Patriots they had that structure. What you guys are doing with Suzuki and all is what very similar with the Patriots did in NFL too for a long period of time when they were winning everything.
Yeah. But I think I also think it's important to stress. I mean, we're not overly pressuring people to buy in. I mean, it's certainly part of the sales pitch. But I mean, if you decide you would like to go another route, then But with example of Lane Hudson, I mean, we still control his rights for 5 more years. So there was a patient path. He's a great kid and a great player, but we all found that was the way we wanted to move forward, and so we did.
Well, I think, but you're right, but there's also something not to underestimate. Like in the NFL, okay, in the CBA, you cannot negotiate an extension of a drafted player before the end of his 3rd season. So that no matter how well that player plays in those first 3 years, there is nothing you can do to actually go and get the team at the negotiating table. You are not allowed. So from when I look at the NFL deals, right, and I see how they are, they're taking a lot of risk on their body to get there and never know what things can happen. So you're right that the players take credit, but I also think it's very encouraging to see teams, well, in your case, the Habs, take the route of, hey, we've seen enough after 2 seasons or after 1 year, and we'll make that commitment to you, because that's a powerful statement too. And I think it also helps the culture of the team as well to not feel like you're getting put on the back burner and you're going out there and take years. And I feel it all goes together.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, in the NHL, the earliest you're allowed to extend is a calendar year out.
Okay.
So you mentioned the different amounts of time that we had these players. The difference being with Lane and with Cole is that they both came in and burned a year of their contracts. So we were able to sign them with much shorter track records. But essentially, in all those cases, and we haven't even mentioned, but Caden Gooley's another one. We signed them as soon as they were eligible to sign. So I think that is an important piece too. It's a sign of our respect for these kids and these players, these young men, is that we're willing to do that. Like you said, we're not always going to find the sweet spot where the number, the term, and the dollars and everything makes sense for everyone. But I think we're still showing a willingness to make that an option for young players. Yes.
What are agents' reactions though, John? Like, let's say put Cortex aside, right? Put Ken Hughes, Le Cavalier's group aside. Like when you go to agents with this idea of extending early, Jen and I were talking about it, right? We're saying, does the agent typically react positively, or do they see like an issue with this and would advise more patience?
They need to have the same mentality as you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think an agent's role, and Sasha can obviously speak to this much better than I can, but for me, and Ken always says this, I mean, the agent's role is really to reflect the interests of their player. So, I mean, certainly, I've never had an agent say to me, why are you giving us an 8-year offer now? I mean, it's certainly there's obviously there can be a difference of opinion over what that offer should be worth, and but I mean I think it's been overwhelmingly positive in my experience. But again, I think but a lot of it just really boils down to the player and what that player wants, because that's who the agent ultimately represents.
I agree.
Let's talk about Noah Dobson.
Noah Dobson, yeah.
Noah Dobson. So can you walk us through how it takes place with negotiating an extension with the player that you want trade for?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, given all the tampering rules and you're not allowed to discuss anything with a player or his representative who is not your player without the express permission of his current club. So I think in that instance, I think part of there can be different strategies involved when you're holding a player like that, whether or not to make them available to discuss contract terms, because a lot of teams. I mean, in the case of Noah, I think Noah was one arbitration year away from being unrestricted. So I think the Islanders felt that my buddy Matthew Darsh felt that the best way to maximize his trade value was probably for teams to know what he would cost on a long-term extension. So that window was afforded to teams in that case, us being obviously one of the teams that took advantage of it. So I think, obviously before the trade was completed, we had an idea of what the contract would look like. Well, sorry, even more so. I mean, the Islanders filed the contract. Technically speaking, it was a sign and trade. So he could do 8 years. But obviously we're not having conversations with them without permission from the Islanders. So it was all completed as a package. We weren't going to make the trade until we had a contract in place or the parameters of a contract in place.
And just so you mentioned something interesting, the sign and trade to get the 8 years. Had you guys signed him after the trade, it would have been 7 years, the maximum. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Exactly. So by having the current club sign him, he was able to get that 8th year and then right away trade him, which a sign and trade is very typical in the NBA, for example. We see that a lot.
Yes.
In hockey, I don't see that. I don't think we see that very often. But
no, there have been a few, a half dozen. I believe Matthew Tkachuk was one. I'd have to.
Yeah. Okay.
It's that type of situation. I think generally where you're, where a player is at or near free agency, and you're, so like I said, when you're a club and you're holding one of those players, you have to decide because the player, then you do give the player a certain amount of control over his trade if you make that a piece of it. But they were able to trade him anywhere in the league, but any team trading for him would have had uncertainty about his contract status. So for us, the cost of acquisition, certainly we were willing to pay more, knowing what he would cost moving forward, and that we could sign him.
as soon as the club gives you authorization to speak to him, then he almost becomes like you're trying to go after an unrestricted free agent, basically, right? It's the same type of process, because there's other teams that are going to have that permission too to negotiate an extension with him.
Yeah, again, I think the and I mentioned the word earlier, but comparables, like comparables or comps, that like when you're looking at Noah Dobson and his contract, I mean, you're looking at similarly situated players. So we knew, going in that he's going to have the right to arbitration, and his likely arbitration number is X. So but it's a little bit different than an unrestricted free agent, but in a sense, you're not wrong. I mean, but for the play, those deals actually, quite frankly, are fairly easy, because for the player, if they're motivated to come to your team, then you don't waste a lot of time going back and forth, quite honestly, because everyone's really there's not a lot of time to make a decision, and everyone's really rowing in the same direction.
And I'm guessing your trade with the Islanders was already agreed upon before being able to speak to him. Like, it was done, like the pieces of the trade were done, and it's conditional to you guys agreeing to an extension with him. Is that pretty much how it works? Because I guess it would be a bit awkward if it was the opposite, but maybe I'm wrong.
I can't remember the exact order, but I mean, they may have granted permission slightly ahead, but we knew roughly what the price would be.
Okay.
There were still multiple teams involved right to the end. I know that. But yeah.
Let's talk about your role with the Laval Rocket. Rocket de Laval, you are the GM.
Wait.
And you were named the best GM of the league last season. Congrats.
Thank you. Merci.
So what is your role? What do you do for Laval?
Well, I'm the GM. No, so I guess I would say,
but can you give me example of?
No, yeah, of course. Obviously, the two teams, and I'll say three teams because I'll include Trois-Rivières, they're very intertwined. The day-to-day operation of the Laval Rocket is very much tied to the operation of the Montreal Canadiens in so many different ways. I mean, one is, an injury in Montreal affects Laval, it affects Trois-Rivières. So really, in the summer, you'll sit down and I'll sit down with our director of pro scouting, Eric Crawford, and our head of analytics, Christopher Boucher, and my coaches, obviously, but and we kind of we try and build a roster around pieces that we know we're going to have that are drafted players or young prospects or free agent signings, like college free agents, things like that. And then I try and build a roster around that with their help. Obviously that finds the right balance between player development and competitiveness. We don't want to have too many veteran players that take up ice time from Owen Beck and Phil Machar and David Reinbacher and Adam Engstrom, but also you don't want those players to be just completely exposed with nobody around them. So it's always the American League is much more so than the NHL. There's the player movement is a lot. Most players are signing for 1 year at a time. So there's a lot of turnover year over year. Whereas, in the NHL, you have a lot more. We know going into the year what a lot of our team is going to look like, right? Because of contracts.
Do you choose the Calder Cup or to develop?
I choose to develop, yeah.
Okay.
A dream scenario is winning a Calder Cup with young players improving and playing a massive role on the team, But yeah, a lot of people ask this question, and a lot of people, but to be honest with you, I don't find it that difficult to balance the two things. I think if you have good young players, we had the best record in the league last year. Mm-hmm. We didn't win a Calder Cup, but we had a lot of young players playing first-year pros, playing huge roles on that team. They were very good. And we were very good because our young players were very good. I think we had, I believe it was 10 playoff rookies. It was 10 playoff rookies in Montreal, but I believe it was the same in Laval when we started the playoffs. So yeah, it's not that we're not trying to win, but we want to win. We want to win the right way. It's again. This also depends a lot on where you're at as an organization. There are certainly teams, if you look around the American League, that are much older. That they don't have the same prospect pool. We've had an absolute ton of draft picks over the last number of years, and those players are all coming out. Every year we're adding new young players, and yeah, that's to me that's the primary function of the team in Laval. And that's also, I think part of my being the GM speaks to that component. I'm not independent of the Montreal front office. Obviously, I spend every day with Jeff and Kent, so our priorities are all very much aligned. And I think, the other piece, of course, is, and Marty's referenced it a few times, is we want the players that come up to be ready to contribute in Montreal. So there has to be a lot of, we play similar structure in Laval to the structure we play in Montreal, because we don't want players confused when they're up and down. It just doesn't benefit the organization. But yeah, it's just been amazing to see it's my favorite part is the young guys coming up and being able to play in the NHL. It's just been great. So yeah, and then so in terms of day to day, I mean, I try and speak to the coach every day. We just what's going on today, injury wise, players that may need to go up or down, but it's been. But obviously, I have the American League Coach of the Year in Laval as well. So he's been an absolute pleasure to work with, and it's pretty easy to be the GM of the Laval Rocket.
Well, you guys got a good thing going, John, and good job. Congrats for all you've done, man. It's been a pleasure. I mean, we've known each other for years now, but you've been awesome, and it's great to see you kind of continue in this role and working with Laval and winning the award last year. And
it's impressive.
Yeah, it is, and. I know you're a humble guy, but I think a lot of the credit goes, yes, to the players, the age, but you guys, the front office, yourself, Kent, Jeff, the whole team, like Marty, with the culture that you built. Like, these guys have to say yes to wanting to stay in Montreal first and foremost before we even talk about any dollars and cents, right? And I think that a lot of that goes to what you guys have built. And I mean, this was fantastic. I think a lot of our listeners, like to hear about how the business of sports works. So we talk about different subjects, but feel your insight was the best we could ever get in terms of how this would work.
It's like Christmas before time with you.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Really?
It was awesome. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
I might just come on again for the compliments.
That's it. I mean, that's what I'm saying, man. Listen, you guys, it's all going good. And thanks a lot for doing it. Appreciate you accepting my proposal. Thanks to Chantal too.
And thank you. And maybe next time we'll do the interview in French. Peut-être.
Oui, on peut laisser.
Ou on jouera au golf, les trois ensemble.
Si les questions sont pas trop compliquées.
Ou on jouera au golf, tout le monde ensemble.
On peut jouer au golf en français.
Ça, c'est correct. Ça, c'est facile. I swear in French on the golf course, so it's easy. There you go.
En français ou en anglais?
En français.
Parce que c'est triple bogey en français aussi, oui.
Ouais.
Merci beaucoup, John.
Merci, John.
Merci.
Oh my God, Sasha. OK. Je suis impressionnée. Il était tellement gentil, John, ça n'a aucun sens.
C'était vraiment une belle entrevue. Honnêtement, là, John, ça fait, comme on a parlé en ronde, peut-être une dizaine d'années que je le connais.
Je
sais. Et c'est toujours quelqu'un qui est très sympathique.
Hyper généreux.
Super généreux, super gentil, terre à terre. Mais d'avoir l'occasion de lui parler puis de nous expliquer un peu plus comment fonctionnent ces genres de négociations-là. Puis, tu sais, il revenait beaucoup avec des sujets comparables. Tu sais, le Canadien doit faire un très bon travail, les agents aussi.
Mais c'est ça que je pensais en amont, avant. Ouais.
Puis ça, la négociation, pour moi, ça a toujours été... Il faut mettre beaucoup, beaucoup d'importance sur la préparation. Les gens pensent que la négo, c'est... tu rentres dans la discussion, tu parles de chiffres, tu parles... Non, beaucoup de ta négo, c'est la préparation, puis c'est comprendre ton marché. Puis ça, je pense que le Canadien, avec John, j'ai aucun doute qu'ils le font très bien, puis ils se situent où est-ce qu'ils voient le joueur à un certain niveau, avec la valeur qu'il a selon les comparables. Il est revenu à plusieurs reprises avec ce mot-là, comps, comparables.
Ouais.
Fait que les comparables, c'est quelque chose de très important, mais la culture de l'équipe, puis...
Mais c'est ça, je pense qu'ils ont réussi vraiment à cerner des personnalités qui fit avec le Canadien de Montréal, et c'est ce qui fait en sorte qu'en ce moment, ils sont capables de trouver, il a dit le sweet spot, là, tu sais, le parfait mix ou équilibre pour bien s'entendre avec les joueurs présentement.
Ben, ce que je trouve, puis on en a parlé un peu, mais ça prend un certain type de personnalité d'accepter une somme d'argent, qui est une belle somme, mais d'être conscient que bientôt ton contrat peut être vu comme étant une aubaine. Puis pour moi, ça va dans la personnalité des individus que tu as repêchés, que tu signes. Ce concept de prioriser. Tu sais, prioriser le fait d'être le mieux payé. C'est sûr que comme agent, tu veux toujours être le plus payé possible, mais comme il a dit, puis Kent Hughes a raison, le rôle de l'agent, c'est de respecter les intérêts et la volonté de ton client.
Ouais. Puis c'est cool aussi qu'il dit qu'il était the other side.
C'est ça. Moi, je trouve ça... Cette embauche-là de Kent Hughes, pour moi, était... C'est pas la première fois qu'un agent d'athlète se retrouve comme directeur général ou qui est considéré, mais c'est pas la norme. Et je pense qu'il amène la perspective qu'on voit présentement de comment présenter une proposition et comprenant les deux côtés. Et pour moi, le gros point ici, c'est que la culture que le Canadien a bâtie, c'est pas juste un coach puis avec une volonté de l'administration. Pour que la culture soit respectée, ça prend les acteurs principaux qui sont les joueurs qui embarquent là-dedans. Et on est choyé présentement d'avoir ça à Montréal et c'est pas moi, je suis fan du Canadien depuis que je comprends le sport à la télé. Je ne me souviens pas d'une culture de cette équipe-là de ma génération. J'ai 34 ans. Je ne crois pas avoir vu ça. Et je pense pas qu'il faut le prendre pour acquis. Oui, il y a des enjeux, puis oui, il y a des choses qui sont améliorées. Mais quand tu t'entends parler de comment les choses se déroulent, que Matheson accepte parce qu'il veut rester à Montréal, que Slavkovski, Caulfield, Goulet, on n'en a pas parlé, il en a fait allusion, Hudson, c'est vraiment impressionnant. Dobson qui choisit Montréal dans une transaction, mais de comprendre un peu plus comment ces négociations se déroulent, moi, j'ai trouvé ça vraiment intéressant. Puis, il y a un point que John a mentionné qu'on n'a pas pu parler, mais je veux en parler avec les gens qui nous écoutent ou qui nous regardent. Il a parlé à un moment donné que le fait de signer une extension plus tôt pour les joueurs leur sauve l'argent aussi sur l'assurance qui protège contre les gains futurs. Et là, je sais qu'il y en a peut-être qui ont entendu ça, qui se disaient, c'est quoi ça? Quand tu joues un sport, surtout un sport de contact, tu as des risques de blessure. Quand un joueur est dans les débuts de sa carrière, il a souvent un contrat moins payant. Mm-hmm. En attendant de signer son extension, exemple, Suzuki avait fait, je pense, presque pas un point par match, mais je pense 60 points en 80 matchs, admettons, là, on dit n'importe quoi. C'est quand même un joueur qui va être payé plusieurs millions de dollars par année en attendant son extension. Le rôle de l'agent, c'est aussi de le conseiller, de dire « Hey, tu devrais prendre une police d'assurance qui, si jamais tu as une blessure là, je touche du bois, là, vous m'entendez cogner, je touche du bois quand je parle de blessure avec les athlètes tout le temps, qui t'empêche d'avoir une carrière long terme, tu as une carrière plus tôt, tu peux prendre une police d'assurance qui fait en sorte que l'assureur va te payer ce que tu as perdu. Ça coûte, mais c'est des primes excessivement chères.
OK, donc ça coûte moins cher, la police d'assurance, quand tu signes plus tôt.
En fait, c'est que tu n'as plus besoin de l'avoir.
OK.
Parce que dans le fond, tu as garanti tes revenus futurs avec ton extension de contrat. Tu sais, fait qu'exemple, un joueur qui a 5 ans avant de signer cette grosse extension, pendant 5 ans, il va payer sa prime d'assurance à chaque année.
C'est ça, mais là, tu n'as pas à la payer parce que tu
dès que tu signes ton contrat, tu n'as plus à la payer. Fait ça, c'est des choses qu'on... on a eu Jason, il y a quelques semaines, qui a parlé d'impôts. Oui. Là, on parle de structure contractuelle, on parle de bonus à la signature.
Est-ce que tu es heureux?
Moi, quand je voulais faire ce balado-là, si j'aurais arrivé à la cheville de ce qu'on vient de faire, j'aurais été heureux.
Moi aussi, je te dis, je pensais jamais qu'on irait dans tous ces sujets-là.
C'est incroyable. Puis, tu sais, quand on parle de les rachats de contrats, le buyout, tu sais, le fait que le bonus à la signature fait en sorte que le rachat devient non nécessaire parce que tu ne sauveras pas tant d'argent. Ça sécurise le joueur. Fait que ces concepts-là de structure de contrat sont très intéressants, je pense, pour les partisans de suivre. Puis ça nous donne une meilleure perspective sur ce que ça peut représenter. Puis, tu sais, on aurait pu en parler des heures. Là. Moi, j'avais plein de sujets. À un moment donné, il y a une job à faire. Le Canadien joue ce soir. On tourne mardi, le Canadien joue ce soir.
Oui.
Mais, moi, j'ai trouvé ça spectaculaire.
Merci. Parce que là, de un, t'as trouvé quand même cet invité, mais on l'a fait ensemble.
C'est un travail d'équipe.
Juste... merci à John, puis merci à vous de nous écouter.
Puis merci à Chantal.
Merci à Chantal Maccabé.
Chantal Maccabé, je l'ai contactée à quelques reprises, puis je sais qu'elle est très occupée.
I know.
Puis elle a parlé à John, puis ils ont accepté. Puis c'est pas tous les jours que les Canadiens, tu sais, évidemment, sont très en demande. Fait que non. Puis j'espère que les gens vont avoir apprécié. Évidemment, John, pour vrai, son français est assez impressionnant. T'sais, il vient de Toronto, il grandit...
Meilleur qu'Enick Suzuki, il l'a dit.
Fait que... Mais je pense que c'est important d'avoir cette entrevue-là en anglais parce que c'est sa langue maternelle et ça nous a permis d'aller chercher plus d'informations.
Oui, langue de son travail, c'est sûr et certain que c'est mieux. Alors, merci tout le monde. Puis, dans 2 semaines.
Dans 2 semaines.